Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the World Chess Championship 2023, contested by Yan Nepomniachtchi of Russia and Ding Liren of China. It's currently game number 11 out of their best of 14 match. And after 10 games, Yan Nepomniachtchi leads 5.5 to 4.5. We're in crunch time, folks. There are only 4 games remaining. Both individuals will be getting 2 games with the white pieces and the black pieces, and Ding needs to strike back. Also, have you noticed that during the World Championship, all of my thumbnails have been utterly ridiculous, and I have seen your complaints? Well, here's actually why I did that. When this match began, I started the recaps as any normal person would. I would put Ding and Nepo on the thumbnails, and I named them World Championship Begins, World Championship Game 2, and so on. Those videos performed horribly. In fact, they performed about 30 to 40% worse than my average video. They weren't getting recommended to people, and to the people that they were getting recommended to, they just weren't clicking on them. So I decided, what if I did something ridiculous for games 3 and 4? What if I put some thumbnail like, and then I just put a bunch of brilliant symbols? I got news for you. Those videos got 400,000 more views on average. You know, folks, I am fully aware of just how ridiculous some of my thumbnails look. I am fully aware I'm sacrificing my dignity in some of them with my facial expressions. But that's what gets recommended to people. And that's what gets clicked on. And to be honest with you, I would much rather have the 300 to 400,000 views per video and sacrifice a little bit of integrity. Because the truth is, it's really hard to repackage the same content 14 times in 2 weeks. World Chess Championship, Game 11, 12, 13. That stuff just stops getting recommended at some point. Anyway, I figured I would use this as an intro because I'm also getting tired of it, but it's what's working. I don't really know what to do. All right, so it's kind of my apology to all of you. Like, sometimes if you're a longtime viewer of my content, you know that if you just click, it's gonna be good. But the thumbnail, for some reason, it just has to look like a, like a freak show circus act. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Yan Nepomniachtchi in this game is playing white. And Yan in this match has had tremendous success with the move e4. He played 1 game of d4. We don't talk about it. He plays e4. There was 1 game that Ding played the French. And the French in a World Chess Championship is something that you play 1 time and then never play again. Instead, he plays the move pawn to e5, which he knows best, has been playing his whole life. And once again, we have knight f3, we have knight c6, and we don't have an Italian. But in fact, we have a Spanish. Now, there was 1 game, actually the most recent game, where Ding played knight f6, Ding played a Berlin, and I was actually predicting another Berlin because it's a relatively non-forcing line, and you can sort of predict what Yan is going to do. He's going to play d3, and I sort of figured, I don't know, I figured Ding would go back to this, but Ding probably went back to his other Spanish after patching up a few holes and patching up a few question marks, and so the bishop retreats, and we have knight f6 attacking the pawn, castles, bishop e7. You will remember, or maybe not, in game 1 of this match, Yan took this knight. You will also remember that Yan has played a few games of d3. Well, we are back to d3. Maybe not a few games, maybe just 1 game. They've played so many Spanishes, but we are back to d3. And d3 is what's known as an anti-martial. I mean, it's game 11 at this point. You should kind of be following along. You should know that if we have rook e1, if we have b5, bishop here, castle, c3, basically Ding is trying to play d5. And maybe we will get a martial at some point, but I really don't think so. I really don't think it's going to happen because Yan is trying to avoid the martial. And I mean, also Magnus plays the martial. And when Yan played Magnus, he was also playing like random anti-martials. So instead, we have d3, we have b5, bishop b3, kicking out the bishop. You actually have to kick out the bishop because if you just castle, now you just completely lose the pawn on e5 and you are just losing. So you have to play b5, bishop here, d6, and a3. Now we have our first new position of the match. This might be completely meaningless to you, but in the other game that we had from this position, Yan played c3, and then it was a game of h3 and a4. Pretty big sideline, pretty big sideline, and he went for an anti-martial approach that had been tested very few times. It was tested by Firouzja, And in that game, Ding had a few chances to equalize, but he was unable to, and Jan won. I mean, it wasn't some sort of like miraculous, cutting edge game of chess or anything, but Jan played a very, very nice game. Ding had a few chances to hold on. He missed them, and so Jan won. But once you play c3, you're kind of not going to go back there. The only other approach rather, is for white to play a4. It's always kind of a question mark of when white wants to play a4. I believe a4 is within Jan's toolbox, but instead he plays a3. Not only does he play a3, and I've talked about this move before, the point of a3 is to put the knight here, make room for the bishop, and also play on the queen side in the future with b4, a4. This is a very popular move. I actually think it's one of the main ideas in this position, a3. It's very trendy nowadays. And not to mention, this setup was played by Jan against Ding in 2020 in the candidates tournament, and Jan won with white. So very, very bad memories potentially for Ding. Now they've played this since, but they played it in online rapid events, but they have had this position quite a bit. That game in the candidates preceded castles. This is the candidates game I'm showing you now. This is not the game that happened today. Knight c3, knight a5, bishop a2, bishop e6. Right, so notice how Ding has not moved his c-pawn, and notice how Ding castled 3 years ago. And it was b4, take, and essentially Jan got his knight on the d5 square, like this, and Ding tried to fight back, and it was a very complex game, but he ended up losing. Well, you'll notice, as I said, no c-pawn, and he castled. Today, Ding plays knight a5 right away, and now instead of castling, he plays c5. So this is very interesting. This is sort of how chess is developed. You know, somebody plays a3, right? Black, a bunch of grandmasters play castles, play knight a5, bishop e6, and then they all face kind of an unpleasant situation on the board. And one of them is like, why do I have to castle? I mean, what if I just don't rush castling? Like, what if I take the setter with my pawn? All right, so this is a new approach from Ding. I mean, it's not a new approach like it's never been played before, but he's just doing it in a slightly different move order. And so Jan continues with his plan. And in case it's not clear, white is not playing a traditional Spanish approach with c3, d4, which is very common. Instead, white is going here with just a very, very clear objective of putting a piece on d5 and trying to win the game that way. And we saw this setup, very similar setup, occur in their other game earlier in this match. We have bishop e6. Of course, now it would be a catastrophe to take. In chess, there is a concept. In chess, there's an advanced concept that I'd like to share with you right now. It's called superseding concepts. That's what I like to call it. It's when you've been taught something and you have something in your head, but there's another something that actually ranks a little bit above that. So you might have been taught doubled pawns are bad. Boom, boom. Oh, doubled pawns. Look, I can attack it. It's so weak. No, actually in this position, black can defend the doubled pawn, and by capturing the bishop on e6, you actually completely lost control of the d5 square. So even though doubled pawns are good in theory, in this particular position, it's not worth taking the bishop on e6 just because you saw in some YouTube video somewhere that double pawns are bad. Not all double pawns are bad. In fact, some double pawns are very good, especially if they can be well protected. So instead of that, Jan plays bishop g5, and the very, very simple idea here is to play takes and put something on d5. I mean, in a nutshell, that is essentially what it is. Now, personally, I find this position to be extremely uncomfortable for black. I mean, I really hate allowing my opponents to have such an outpost. I really wish my pawns could go backwards. Okay, so knight to d5, I cannot move my pawn back to c6. I'm going to have to rely on my forward counterplay. We have g6 here from Ding, making room for his bishop on g7, and also maybe in the future he will play f5. Maybe not. Maybe his bishop will just go to the diagonal, but at least it's out of the way. Jan plays queen to d2. This actually does have a threat. The threat of queen to d2, you might think, is take the knight. Oh, wait, no, that's protected. Oh, it's to go here. No. It's very important to make sure that you are seeing every single piece interaction on the board, friendly or opposing. This is opposing. This is friendly. The queen cannot support two pieces at the same time on two diagonals. So the threat is knight takes bishop, queen takes knight. Right? That is the tactical threat. To take, and then to take. All right? So bishop g7. Now, the bishop moved and took its eye off g5. So now white can play knight to g5. Is that winning? No. No. I mean, it's move 15 in a World Chess Championship match. I would hope somebody is not in a losing position already, because then I would demand a refund. I have to turn off my radiator before it starts hissing like a rattlesnake. My radiator is extremely annoying. Which, if you don't know at this point, I've been recording videos from this place for about a year now. Year and a couple of months. Typical steam radiator of New York. Knight to g5. Now, is it a threat to take the bishop now? Well, perhaps. For example, h6, take. That pawn is certainly weak. How exploitable is it? It's another question, right? I mean, rook e8. So, knight g5. And now Ding plays the move c4. All right, he spends 12 minutes on this move. And this is a very, very flimsy move. By flimsy, I mean, like, the floodgates are a moment away from opening here. I mean, really, this defensive setup from black almost looks like it shouldn't make sense. For example, b4 en passant, and it looks like, I mean, b4 is just on the way, but black is just in time. Just in time, and you cannot take back with the bishop. You see, if black even waited one move, and white got to play like b4, I mean, this is potentially devastating for black. Potentially completely devastating. Of course, black should play knight c6, not knight b7, but point stands. Like, this is moments away from being potentially extremely unpleasant. Jan takes on e6 and comes back to e3, and like I said, I mean, he is just knocking on the door. You cannot capture. You cannot capture because I'm not going to take this. I have what we call a Zwischenzug, and I can take on e6 check, and then I will take on d3. And I got news for you. It's not just the pawn. It's not just the pawn. It's much more than that. It's much more than that, and this knight on d5 is going to dominate. So Ding has to fight back right now, and he does. Bishop h6, a very, very well-timed move. This move not only improves the condition of the bishop, it also actually kind of neuters a lot of white's plans. Knight g4, knight c4, all of this is now impossible. And maybe black is starting his own attack. That might be wishful thinking. Rook d1, with the intention of taking on c4, followed by this. This knight and this queen are holding together the entire position here. Now Ding anticipates the opening of the b file, and he plays rook b8, a nice move, so that after dc4, there is always pressure on b2. And now, folks, we have knight takes c4, bishop takes, pawn takes, and personally here, I would have liked to see the move queen c3. I would have liked to see this move. It unpins, and it threatens to essentially win the game on the spot by taking on c4 with the knight. That does win the game on the spot, by the way, because you also win every other pawn. So after queen c3, we would have gotten bishop e3. Now, you cannot take with the queen because of rook b2. I mean, you might be able to. You might be able to. And then we'll get a heavy piece endgame. It's not me commenting on the weight of the pieces. I am above that. But rather, the heavy pieces are called the queens and the rooks. Or rather, the queens and the rooks are called the heavy pieces. So I would have liked to see queen c3. Unfortunately, we get queen to d6. And now we get the apocalypse. Now we get the apocalypse. Now we get something that looks straight out of The Last of Us. If you close your eyes here for a second, queen takes d6. Close your eyes. Seriously, close your eyes. I'll just listen along. Listen to all the capturing sounds. Rook takes d6. Bishop e3. F e3. Rook f1. King f1. Rook b2. Rook e6. Rook c2. Rook a6. And a couple moves later, rook a3, rook e3. Okay, you can open your eyes now. This is what happened. I woke up this morning, I saw this position. I was like, what? It's like 6 a.m. They drew in like a 90 minutes? I'm sorry if that's a spoiler, by the way. I mean, if you think anybody's going to win this position, obviously it's not going to happen. Rook and 3 versus rook and 3. In fact, rook and 2. And there is just no way that the pawn can be defended. So they repeat moves. Yeah, I mean, just to walk you through all the exchanges there, it's essentially like it's when a unstoppable force meets an immovable object, right? Like white's position looks great, and it looks like he's going to capture a bunch of stuff, but black is just in time, and black is capturing just enough stuff that he is fighting on equal terms, and the entire position just completely disintegrates. I mean, they just take each other's pieces completely. So, yeah, like I said, in this position, I would have liked to see queen c3. In all likelihood, the game still would have ended in a draw. So, before you click off, and you are completely justified, and so am I, by the way, in ending this recap is going to be the fastest recap. The truth is, I mean, games like this really only benefit the person that are, that's winning the match, right? So now we have 12, 13, 14. So Ding has 2 more games with white. And the interesting thing is he actually ends the match with white. So that could be a very, very big game. Jan doesn't mind draws. He gets more time to rest, and he now has, an extra day. So what happened here? Well, it's not that the Spanish doesn't work, right? It's important to analyze your games correctly. You want to stick around here for like 3-4 minutes? This is like Professor Office Hours. I will tell you exactly how to analyze your chess games. So it's not like this game is a discarding of the Spanish. What this game probably is a discarding of the move a3. Maybe. And even then, maybe it's just the fact that Ding played this unique move order without castling, and therefore Jan was not able to get anything. But the truth is, I mean, Jan had a pleasant position from the opening. He could just play things a little bit differently, somewhere around here. Like the move c4 when Ding thought on his own. Maybe Jan just didn't play in the absolute perfect of fashion. Like maybe here, instead of taking on c4, Jan could have played queen e2 and kept the tension. Computer was actually quite fond of the move queen e2. So really, Jan just maybe rushed taking on c4. That's maybe what happened. I mean, maybe just on move 19, he played a little bit too quickly. Maybe he should have, instead of that, played the move queen e2. But probably if we get another Spanish, we are going to get d3 and maybe like a4 or something. But Ding is going to be ready. Ding is going to be ready for any of these moves. The truth is, folks, this match must now be decided by Ding Liren winning a game with white, because Jan can draw the rest of the games. He's up a game. And I will see you for game number 12 on April 26th. Short recap. Hopefully my explanation of the thumbnails was sufficient, and we will go back to normal thumbnails soon. And for now, get out of here.